All of us have opinions about the media. On this program, our opinions on the media. Here we go. Hello and welcome to another edition of The Media. I'm Michael Fields, General Manager of App TV. You know, over the years, we've witnessed a great deal of change in the way print media is offered to us. Books, magazines, and newspapers barely resemble their former selves. And we're going to talk about why the change has come about and what we can expect to see from the print media in the future. Our group here represents some folks who've studied and teach media. Dr. David Spiceland of App State's Department of Communication is here. Heather Preston is also here. She's also the Department of Communication, my colleagues. And Allison Bennett-Dyke, who is, among other things on campus, the advisor to our student newspaper, The Appalachian. Allison, we're going to start with you because print is really your specialty. Tell me, why have newspapers and magazines, we'll get to books a little later, changed so much? Is it just the economics?
It's the economics because print is very expensive. And also there's so much more that you can do digitally than you can just in print. Digital offers you the opportunity to do broadcast, both television and radio. You do interactive things, you do infographics. So everything that you can do in print, you can also do online. And that's why a lot of people have moved online, and you have a much wider audience online than you do in print. In print, especially for newspapers, you have just the people in your community. Online, you have readers from across the world. So
tell me this. Do you think, last week, we touched on the topic of student media on campus. You're the advisor to the Appalachian newspaper. I know that you have an online presence.
yes.
Can you envision a time in the next, let's say, 5 years when you would stop printing a hard copy?
Yeah, actually before I came to App State, I was the advisor of district at the Savannah College of Art and Design, and we were the first college paper to go online only back in October of 2008. So we killed the weekly print product altogether, went digital only. So I got to kind of learn how to run a digital product and also advise that. It was a lot different from print, so I kind of had to, I guess, move backwards when I came here to go back to print. So it was interesting. So when I first got here, I joked all the time, about how print was dead, and my students kind of railed against that a little bit, but now they're starting to embrace it more. We've talked about moving from twice a week to just once a week, embracing digital more, but we track our analytics. It's a lot easier to track your readership online than it is in print because you have those numbers right there in front of you. You can update stuff automatically. So you can be a daily product online where you can't do that if you're in print.
You can stay, graduates, alumni can stay in touch with campus, which they really can't do in print.
Right.
David, let me have your prediction. 10 years from now, will there be a print edition of the New York Times, do you think?
I hope so. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. And again, I have more of a broadcast background. And there is a culture kind of thing between the print people and the broadcast people, which...
Age.
Well, and I hate even putting it that way because really it's something that goes back to early editions, what print was like or whatever. When I was doing television news, the radio guys, and I was the TV guy, we would go to a local place and share stories, help each other out. And the print guy, great guy, he would never come over and associate with us. I don't know if that was him or if it was the organization, and there's been that dichotomy through the years. However, saying that, I love print. I hope that we always have something to where I get that little black print on my fingers, going through it. 10 years from now, I remember when I came here 22, 23 years ago, some of the changes. So to make a long story short, I hope we have print. I hope we have something I can tangibly touch. Will we? It's an issue of economics. It's an issue of whatever the public will accept. And frankly, I'm concerned about what we are producing, and this is not a criticism of K through 12, but do our kids really embrace reading? If they don't, we're in trouble.
All right, let me extend that question for just a moment, because let's say the New York Times, which is perhaps a one of its kind, there used to be certainly newspapers who thought they could compete with the Chicago Tribune, the LA Times, so forth. But right now, the New York Times occupies a kind of elite position and unique position. They might be around in 10 years, but what about a less stellar publication? Let's say the Charlotte Observer. Which is a good newspaper, but there's less reason for it to last 10 years than there would be for the New York Times. Anyone? Heather?
I think that, I'm not sure about the Observer, but I think that print will be here, and I just want to play off of something Dave said. I don't have any fish I need to wrap. I don't have a bird cage I need to line. I don't have any presents I need to wrap in newsprint, and I really hate the black smudgy ink that comes off on your hands and the really cheap paper experience, the tactile experience of a newspaper. But I really hope it does stay. I think it will stay. You mentioned something about our kids reading. And the studies are showing that the age group of 18 to 34, or the generation known as the millennials, are reading more than their peers, their older generations, and they're reading, 88% of them access their news digitally via Facebook feed. More than half of them follow up those stories, right? And a lot of them are going to print in order to follow up those stories. Not so much for newspapers as much as for magazines and books, but a lot of them are going to print. So and they quote the same things that you and I would quote: the tactile experience, the smell of paper, the look of the printing on the page, where the letters have particular shapes and serifs and widths and narrowness, and it's all of that experience. The idea of getting a book that has somebody else's name in it and a date, or in the case of textbooks, getting textbooks
Notes.
that have been through the mill 2, 3, 4, 5 times and have notes in the margins, right? So there are all sorts of reasons for them to keep interacting with print, and I think that will keep it alive. And what's really funny, you mentioned that you were the first paper to go totally online in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
There were a number of articles in 2008 asking the question, will print be around in 5 years, or going outright and saying the demise of print will occur in 5 years, and here we are, right? And I can only imagine some of the conversations that have happened over time from 1455, when the Gutenberg Bible was printed, to now, 560 years later, right? Then here we are, we still have print, we still have books.
We have been, but we mentioned previously, I think you mentioned it, Allison, that one of the things, quite obvious, but one of the things that digital gives you is range of distribution, that it can be read anywhere if people know it's there. All they have to do is, do that, and they're there. You can't do that as easily with print. Sure, you can send them through the mail, but they're not instantaneous, and so on and so forth. Does the role that the publication serves play a role in its need to exist? For instance, I'm in Charlotte, and there's going to be a big, Thanksgiving Day parade. I'm not sure that in the wide range of media options out there today that I would necessarily turn to the Charlotte Observer, I don't mean to pick on them, but the local newspaper, for all of my international, national news. But if I wanted to know what streets to avoid on Thanksgiving Day in downtown Charlotte, I would sure go first to the local newspaper. And I guess what I'm saying, or what I'm asking, is does the role the paper play or should play have something to do with its survivability?
I think definitely, because local papers can serve citizens there and talk about government and things like that, where they can't get that anywhere else online, because the New York Times is not going to have any information about city council meetings in Boone, North Carolina. So the papers need to realize what they offer, what they can offer that other publications can't, and take advantage of that and really act as hyper-local products. And they can do that online or in print. There's not really, as long as you're delivering that message, the medium doesn't really matter quite so much, I don't think. It depends on what kind of audience you have there. Older, generations are not going to go online quite so much. So, print product is probably better for areas, like in Florida, where everybody's a little bit older. So really kind of pay attention to where your audience is. But really kind of, one thing that I learned when I was working at SCAD was you have to be constantly marketing yourself, because people aren't going to automatically go to you. They don't walk past a newsstand and see you. You have to be driving people to your product all the time and be, paying attention to kind of what you offer and communicating that to your audience all the time, which is a lot of work. But that's really what papers, I think, need to be doing.
And costs a lot of money.
It does, yeah. And you can get creative with it, but it is kind of, it should be top of the mind all the time. So yeah, I think papers should be kind of realizing what they can offer that other places can't, and really take advantage of that, I think.
Well, now this sort of plays into that business of what is your purpose for being? For instance, one of the things that industries in print that is in pretty dire shape are magazines, periodicals. I mean, we've seen death and destruction to our favorite magazines and things like that. Yet one of the most vital and growing areas of print media are the specialty magazines. There are new titles by the dozens, by the scores every year. And the ones that cater to, for instance, Hispanic males and so forth are find a demographic niche and serve it. Does that give us any kind of a lesson for survivability of at least local, small town, or medium city newspapers to be able to survive? For instance, an ethnic newspaper, if there is a large enough ethnic community in your area to be served, are we driving it that way?
Well, are we reflecting our readership, our listenership, if we're talking about like a radio station? There's things out there, some theories such as agenda setting. And what we're kind of dancing around in some ways is that we assume that what is in print is the truth. Well, what is the truth? A publisher might say the truth is what I print. But if you're talking about how media affects public attitudes, political attitudes, you're talking about, like in print, like a newspaper, what is above the fold says this is what's important. This is what we think, with the headline, with the picture, which by the way are now in color last 20 or 30 years with competition from television. So does the audience out there really understand how they are affected by the media? And why do they hate us so much? This goes in a different direction, I'm sure, than what you're trying to go today, and that might be a whole other topic. But look at a television broadcast, look at a TV show, and when they present the media and they come in, they've got the microphones and they're
insensitivity. How do you feel?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they hate us. The audience, hate us, but they use us. So there's a utilitarian sort of approach there to where we serve a function, we the media, but...
Well, let's just go down that rabbit hole for a minute.
Okay.
Even though we're straying a little bit. Anybody want to venture a guess, or anyone want to tell us about some research you've seen? Because this periodically comes out. What is the most trusted form of media today? Print, broadcast, radio, television. Have you seen any statistics?
Local television news, broadcast news.
Mainly because, I would guess, because it's so actuarial. They're out there on the scene, usually a few minutes, because they can't predict it, and you see the accident, and yeah, there it is. I
would imagine that does play a role, but I also think just the fact
Familiarity?
that there's probably very few households without, not probably, there are very few households without television access. It's accessible. So it's a blend of accessibility and immediacy.
Isn't that?
And it's, it's the holdover of you sit down and you watch it either while you're eating dinner or before you eat dinner. It's that part of the culture. Culture plays a huge role in all of this. We were talking earlier about the culture of just picking up a newspaper. You have to drive them to the newsstand. But that's very much culturally determined. When I travel to England a lot, it is a morning ritual for everyone. You arrive at Paddington Station from where else outside London you live, you pick up a stack of papers, and they've all been reformatted to fit easily into whatever you're carrying and read on the tube when it's like this, first thing in the morning. And that is, I can go to any pub and sit and talk with somebody at 3 in the afternoon, and they've read 5 or 6 papers, from the Guardian to the Financial Times to the rags that are out there, right? So do we do a good job in our culture of creating a culture of reading news? It is probably a more apt question. And could we do that? But yeah, that's going back to something that we've already talked about.
Just print lady, let me ask you a question. Does it sting a little bit when you hear someone say the most trusted form of source for news is local television news?
A little bit, because local television news a lot of times gets their headlines from print newspapers. I read the morning paper.
Sometimes more than the headline.
Yeah,
Oh, yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
I actually interned with a TV station in Savannah for a semester, and they got every single story they did came from the newspaper that was downstairs from them. So every headline that they went for, every story they went for, it all got sourced from the newspaper. I think a lot of it is because you can see people on broadcast TV too, and like you recognize those faces, especially when they're people that have stuck around for a long time. Whereas in print journalism, you see a byline, but there's no connection. You don't see their faces, and I think that's probably a lot of it too.
Before we, and we still have time, but so I don't want anybody to clip your answers. But what about books? The way we market books, the way we as civilians buy books, probably has changed more than anything. The e-book is now, I mean, I use it because I eat out a lot, and I go out to eat alone a lot. And taking a book with me, I mean, I'm trying to find ketchup bottles and things to hold the pages down. But in fact, an e-book is perfect for me. I was an early adopter. I heard last week that one of the publishers or something is now doing higher quality paper and more attractive and more interesting covers and things. But what about the e-book, the revolution to e-books?
Yeah, it's funny, I saw a word yesterday that I wasn't aware of, velocore, which the definition is the melancholy you get from used bookstores when you enter used bookstores. So the melancholy of used books. Yeah. I don't think you have to use a British phrase, tart it up, right? I don't think you have to go with shiny and ooh, new. That's the wrong move. The beauty of books is the history of books. It's the things that we've already talked about today. It's the smell of the paper. And used books have that appeal, because they carry with it that tactile and other sensory experiences. I love ebooks for the fact that I can travel with them. I can take the entire world's library on a plane and I'll never get bored, right? But I don't like them because I can't fall asleep with it open on my chest on a rainy day, right? I don't like them for that reason, that they're hard and the reading comprehension isn't as good, and the studies show that. There is something that happens when you turn pages that solidifies what you've read before, and as a copy editor, I can vouch for this, solidifies what you've read before and what you're reading later, and you make the mental mind connections or the mind maps much stronger with the tactile experience of turning pages and being able to go back and reference something. That's much harder in e-format. Even with links built in that will take you back, the navigation is not nearly as easy. And plus, you don't have
Footnotes
actual
are
page.
terrible, too.
They are
I hate
terrible.
that.
And images, when you pop them up, they're not that great either.
And they never end up on the page that they're supposed to be on. The cut line
That's right,
is
yes.
either before or
Yes,
after.
and you're going, wait, who am I? Where am I today?
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
But you know, one of the ironies, though, is that smell, particularly the old library. I remember when I was a kid going to this library in Wyandotte, Michigan, and having that smell. Well, that smell is the deterioration of the print.
It is, yeah.
And there's something about the preservation of culture. I'm really big on you know, what newspapers and not just the print media, but broadcast media in terms of preserving that image. Broadcasters do a horrible job.
The worst.
Yeah, and newspapers.
Maybe the motion picture industry used to. Can you
Yes.
imagine losing the soundtrack, Warner Brothers, to My Fair Lady, because they didn't think there would ever be another use for it? Newspaper, at least there have been, what do they call that business of in the library of going back
Oh, the
news-
Microfilm.
microfilm, yes,
Yeah.
or microfiche.
Yeah.
or something.
Microfiche,
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate that.
So let's just survey the panel. Here we are, 4 media types. Heather, what do you read in the way of fiction, nonfiction, newspapers, periodicals?
Oh, goodness me. It's a vast and sundry list. I read Stephen King for fiction. I read a number of other people for fiction as well, but he's probably one of my most favorite authors.
And usually electronically, digitally.
It depends. If it's a quick read, something like a Sue Grafton novel, which I absolutely love, the Kinsey Mahone mysteries, those I'll do I collect Stephen King books. I've got every one, first edition, so that goes on the shelf. For nonfiction, well, I'm working on my doctorate, so there's a lot of that, and I tend to buy the books when I need them for my collection. 2, I need to make notes on them, and I don't care how good your PDF function is or how good your notation device is on your tablet. It is not the same. I need to be able to go back and scan where those are. And as a copy editor, my mind works that way. I can tell you that on page 5 I read this, it's out of context on page 438. They've used it wrong. And so that helps me. In terms of periodicals, Rolling Stone, I love music. So Rolling Stone is the primary one. I don't read a whole lot of magazines anymore, to be honest with you. I just simply don't have the time. In terms of news, I read the New York Times. That's my primary source, but that's
No
not my
local-
only source.
Do you ever?
I go online for local stories. I
The
actually
Democrat?
I actually catch at Mountain Times. I actually catch local news on the radio on the way into work in the morning. And,
Where do you get most of your radio?
I can't remember the call letters for the.
But is it NPR, WATA?
No, it's FM. It's the.
But it's a local station.
Yeah, it's a local station. It's a
Okay.
local station. But I also surf, so I'm listening to Charlotte as well. But
Okay.
for local news, I'm listening to a local station.
David, run down the list.
I love historical. I don't read a lot of fiction. Historical novels can be okay. I'm gonna admit that I have more books than I can ever read, and I feel like I'm the only guy in the world who's bought more books that I'll never be able to read. I wish I had 48 hours and 24 hours.
It's an impulse thing. You're in a bookstore and you see something you think you'll like.
Not like I used to, but
I've got a stack of to-be-reads. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm the same way as well. But for instance, I was in Arizona a couple of weeks ago, and I found a book on Stan Jones, who is a famous, because nobody's ever heard of him, for me he's famous. He wrote a lot of music for Westerns or whatever. Finally, somebody's written a book about this guy. And so, in fact, I talked to the author a couple of days later. And so I like that kind of thing that might be geographically centered. I love books about the West. As far as what I listen to or read, I don't read a lot of newspapers, mostly because I get this pile of papers with that print on my fingers kind of thing.
Magazines?
Magazines, I tend to read like computer magazines,
Unless those written about Macs.
No, nothing about Macs. No, sorry,
We
I
know
don't
each
like-
other pretty well around here.
I'm not a Mac guy.
And what about you, Allison?
I actually have never read a book on an ebook reader before. I'm very much print-based when it comes to books, and
That's
I buy them
interesting.
at garage sales, thrift stores, so I've got more books than I can read. I'm not really a fiction fan, so a lot of nonfiction, a lot of photo books. I have those. And for magazines, I've been actually purchasing magazines for the newspaper students because we're ending the fiscal year soon. So I just bought New Yorker, Communication Arts. I'm buying a Lit Mag. So trying to give them a wide range. And I talked to one of the students yesterday, and he was like, "Well, we don't really need those." And I said, "You can't produce good journalism if you don't read good journalism. You don't read it unless you have it in front of you. So I'm going to put it in front of you, and then y'all are going to read it."
Well,
So.
I just, and mine's sort of confessional too, I don't read as much fiction as I like. I read a lot of historical nonfiction. I'm reading a book on Hamilton and Jefferson right now on my e-book. But I must admit, and I read 3 or 4 magazines just about every week. I'm one of the only people who doesn't resent sitting in a dentist's or a doctor's office waiting, because there are all these magazines around, most of them, of course, horribly out of date, but they're things that I would never subscribe to myself, and it gives. I mean, I've been caught reading a People magazine. I'm sorry, I have to admit that. Anyway,
every hair appointment ever for me. So.
That's right. That's right. I think this has been interesting. We'll have to revisit this topic again, because I think it's an important one. I think that it's too easy for us to be pushed along the technological road without some resistance. And I wish the New York Times had discovered its digital future earlier. I think it may have prevented some massive layoffs and selling of their classical music radio station in New York and so on. But I find myself, despite my reluctance, straddling both digital, and I'm hanging on for dear life to the stuff I love. But the other stuff, I just, it becomes so easy to do. Anyway, we'll revisit this. I'm Michael Fields. Thank you for joining us on The Media. See you next week.